Good morning and welcome to our latest webinar, Move More at Work, Treat Your Body and Brain. I'm delighted to be presenting this webinar this morning. It's something very close to my heart. Just a little bit of housekeeping. I just want to remind you that we will be recording this webinar and it will be available to you afterwards. It'll be emailed to you with some other resources, but it will also be available on our website if you wish to share it with other people. We will also be having a question and answer session at the end of the webinar. So please feel free to put your questions in the question and answer box. You can use the chat box for chatting with other people online, but if you could put your questions in the Q&A box, it would make life a little bit easier for myself. I'm always for that. So that would be great. So today we are delighted to be joined by Professor Charlotte Edwardson, and she's the Deputy Director of the Leicester Lifestyle and Health Research Group. And they undertake research aiming at better understanding how movement behaviours can be used to promote health. Over the last decade, she has specifically been interested in the health consequences of sitting too much and designing and evaluating behaviour change interventions to reduce sitting time in a range of contexts, including schools and in the workplace. She has developed the Smart Work and Life programs, which reduce sitting time and improved health and work-related outcomes in desk-based employees within the NHS and councils across England. And these were the largest studies of their kind worldwide. So it's great to have her with us today to present. Our other presenter will be Jamie Pounceby, and he is one of our own key account managers who's worked with Posturite for over 14 years now. And he has been working in both a home and field-based role. And he has to actually personally manage his own back pain, and so it'll be interesting to hear his stories about that. So really, with no further ado, I'm going to pass over to Charlotte for her webinar today. Over to you, Charlotte.
Thanks, Catherine. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Yes, great, excellent. And thank you for the introduction and for the invitation to present in this webinar. For the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to very briefly go over the research evidence behind the health impacts of sitting too much and why we should be thinking about switching some of the time that we spend sitting for more light intensity incidental movement. And then for the second half of my presentation, I will go over an example of one of the sitting reduction interventions that we've developed called Smart Work and Life for people who have predominantly desk-based jobs and present some of the outcomes and the feedback from the participants. And hopefully within this, there'll be some ideas that you can take either for yourself or for your workplace. If we think about our daily activities, sitting is now ubiquitous. We spend a lot of our waking hours sitting down. We sit down to commute to places. A lot of our jobs now involve sitting down for most of the day. And then when we get home, we sit down to watch TV, we sit down to use our computers again to talk on the phone. So movement in our everyday lives has really been engineered out with advances in technology. And information that we collect from small wearable accelerometers shows that on average, adults spend just over 9 hours per day sitting down. And if you have a desk-based job or a long-term health condition such as type 2 diabetes, you could be sitting for 10 to 11 hours or 12 hours per day. And if we think about how workplaces have changed just over the last few years since the start of the COVID pandemic, a lot of people are now working from home. In 2019, about 12% of people reported working from home for either all or some of their week. This is now around 40% of people. And virtual meetings are now more common. So people really have reduced opportunities for that incidental movement that occurs through the workplace, through commuting, through walking to meetings, walking to see colleagues. So this has increased our sitting time even further. And Catherine will go over some of the Move It survey results, which will provide more insights into how people perceive their sitting behaviour when they're working from home versus when they're at work. And unfortunately, our bodies just weren't designed to sit this much. And we've gathered evidence now over the past 2 decades to show that people who have lower levels of sitting time each day compared to higher levels of sitting have an increased risk of all these different things that you can see on the slide. So we've shown that you could have double the risk of developing type 2 diabetes if you have high levels of sitting time each day compared to low, an increased risk of heart disease, some cancers, anxiety, depression, and dying early. Excuse me. And I get asked all the time, well, how much sitting time is too much? And actually, it's just only in the last few years that researchers has started to indicate where that threshold may lie. And a key study that I was involved in 2019 showed that risks for dying early increased gradually from spending around 7.5 hours a day to 9 hours per day sitting. And then once you got to that 9.5 hour threshold, your risks really started to increase quite steeply. For example, if you sit for 7 hours compared to 7 hours per day of sitting, 9 hours per day sitting was associated with a 15% higher risk of dying early. If you sat for 10 hours, it was 48% higher. And if you sat for 12 hours per day, your risk was 192% higher than someone who sat for 7.5 hours. At the moment, a lot of our research in thresholds has been done around mortality outcomes. So hopefully in the next few years, we can start to understand whether that threshold is higher or lower for different health outcomes, but also higher or lower for people depending on their characteristics. So it may be lower for females, for example, or certain ethnicities. But at least this gives you a bit of an idea of how much sitting might be too much. And physical activity guidelines in the UK and worldwide recommend that adults should try to achieve at least 150 minutes of moderate physical activity every week, or 75 minutes of vigorous physical activity every week in order to get your health benefits. So the research underpinning these guidelines has really been established for decades now. So 70 years of research behind these recommendations. But it's only in recent years that focus has shifted to think, well, if we're spending 20, 25 minutes a day doing our moderate activity, what are we doing with the rest of the day? And does that impact on our health? And I've just shown that it does. And just in the last few years, these guidelines have been updated to now include recommendations around minimizing the amount of time that we spend sedentary and trying to break up those prolonged bouts of sitting with at least light intensity physical activity. So what that's about is really taking some of the time from this red part of the pie and putting it into the yellow part of the pie. So reducing sitting and replacing it with more light intensity movement to make these parts of the pie a little bit more even, because at the moment you can see that the sitting is outweighing the light intensity incidental movement. And what that highlights is not only the negative impact that sitting has on our health, but also the positive impact that just by simply doing more light incidental movement throughout the day can have on our health. And actually, we didn't know that 10 years ago. It was all around you must do moderate to vigorous physical activity in order to get your health benefits. So research over the last few years has shown that increasing and doing more of this light intensity movement can improve your health. It can reduce your risk of dying early. And actually, one research study that was published in the last couple of years showed that doing more of this light activity can add 3 years to your life expectancy. Researchers have also started to look at the impact of regularly breaking up your sitting time with this light intensity activity. And for these type of studies, what we tend to do is ask participants to come into our exercise lab, and we make them sit down for 6, 7, 8 hours a day, and we look at the impact on their health markers. And then we ask them to come back a week or so later, and we ask them to break up their sitting time every 30 minutes, just for a few minutes, with either standing, lightly pottering around, or doing body weight activities. So calf raisers, glute squeezers, squats. So something that you could potentially do standing at your desk. So there's now over 50 studies that have done this type of methodology. So we've got a good body of evidence now. And what they've found is that breaking up your sitting time regularly, just for a few minutes with light activity, can reduce your glucose, your fats in your blood pressure, your fatigue, and also your lower back issues. So all of this research is really saying we need to be thinking about the total amount of time we spend sitting and reducing that, but also looking at these prolonged bouts and trying to regularly break them up throughout the day. So we know that reducing sitting and breaking up sitting is something worth doing, but that's easier said than done when it comes to trying to change people's behaviour. A review that was done a few years ago now that looked at sitting reduction interventions and looking at the intervention functions and behaviour change techniques that led to successful behaviour change showed that those interventions that focused on education, environmental change and persuasion were the most promising in terms of leading to behaviour change. And interventions that include self-monitoring and prompts were successful. So self-monitoring is trying to monitor your sitting behaviour or monitoring your movement behaviour, whether that's through phone apps, wearables, timers, calendar reminders, Google Chrome extensions. And also receiving prompts to remind you to regularly break up your sitting time. And also problem solving, so thinking about how you might reduce your sitting time and overcoming those problems. And also particularly for workplace interventions, those that include peer support and cultural and policy change were particularly successful. So what I'll do for the rest of my presentation is talk you through how we use these intervention functions and behaviour change techniques to develop our smart work and life intervention. In this webinar, I don't have enough time to go into all the background of how we actually developed our intervention, but we started developing it 12 years ago now. So it's been a really long process. So it's had numerous iterations along the way. And this is the one that we've come up with. So it's called Smart Work and Life, designed to reduce total sitting time and regularly break up sitting time. And it takes a whole day approach. So it's not just about focusing on what you do during work hours, it's also outside of work. And it's a multi-component intervention. I've tried to summarise those components in this figure here, so I'll talk you through those. But as Catherine highlighted at the beginning in the introduction, this is the largest study of its kind. So we recruited over 750 council employees across 6 councils in England. So for this study, the first thing we did was to seek leadership team support for the study. So we spent a lot of time presenting to the senior leadership team on the benefits of reducing sitting time for their workforce, not only around prevention of and management of chronic disease, but also for work-related outcomes, so work engagement, occupational fatigue, presenteeism, absenteeism, and musculoskeletal issues. But also highlighting that research shows that by doing this type of behaviour change, it doesn't negatively impact on things like productivity. We also presented to the health and wellbeing boards within the organisations. We developed very brief educational animations to circulate to managers to get all the management team on board. And we also asked the organisations to develop an action plan. So really think about what strategy they wanted to implement in their organisation to reduce sitting time and make it more conducive to movement, thinking about how they would implement it, what they needed to do, who was going to do it. We also trained volunteer employees within the organisations to act as workplace champions. So these volunteers had a half-day training session with our training team on how to facilitate this intervention and act as a positive role model. And it was the senior leadership team who approved 2 hours of protected time for the workplace champions to perform this role. So in the middle of this figure, you can see the individual and group components that we had. So the foundation of our intervention was really the online education element. So it was a brief interactive education session, took around 45 minutes to complete. And this was really to raise awareness of the health impacts of sitting, the benefits of reducing sitting. It got people to estimate their own sitting time, do some goal setting, think about their barriers, and also talk about the importance of self-monitoring and prompts. The champions then sent out monthly emails as a bit of a reminder and motivator. And then we designed a whole host of posters that the workplace champions could put up around the office space to really act as a reminder. And there's just some examples there on the slide of the ones that we came up with. So we had messages around firing your body back into action, getting the balance right, getting people to think about what daily tasks they could do while standing up or moving around, and really promoting that the new norm is around sitting less and moving more often. We also asked the workplace champions to meet with their team every few months and to have sort of a catch-up session. And this was really around brainstorming what they could do as a group or a team to reduce their sitting time. We also suggested numerous sitting less challenges that they could do as a group or individually. And these were just some examples that we came up with. They didn't have to do these, it was more just a concept, so they could come up with their own. So we had things like walking from Leicester to London. So if they were tracking their steps with a phone app or a pedometer or wearable tracker, as a group, they would accumulate the number of steps that it would require to walk from Leicester to London. And then we had things like stand for the height of the top 3 highest mountains in the world, where we converted 1 minute of standing to 1 meter. We then suggested a whole host of freely available self-monitoring or prompt tools. Now, unfortunately, there aren't that many that actually measure sitting. It's quite a difficult thing to measure unless you've got something on your leg. But there were various things out there that we could use as proxies. So we offered various different computer software, and you might have heard of WorkRave. So within this, you can set user-defined timings to remind you to regularly break up your sitting or move away from your screen, but you can use that as a proxy for breaking up sitting time. We suggested Google Chrome extensions. So I particularly like this one called Outstanding. So you can download it onto your browser and it monitors your computer use, but actually it's designed for sitting because all the messages are around sitting, and actually it gives you some quite funny jokes actually that pop up on your screen to remind you to break up your sitting time. And then we suggested some timers and some phone apps as well. And then the last part of the intervention was around thinking about any small environmental changes that you could make in your office space. So can you do standing meetings, walking meetings? Can you have a high table somewhere so people can stand to eat? Can you move your waste paper bins away from your desk so that you actually have to get up and move around? Can you move your printers further away from where the desks are, for example? And then finally, we're really interested in understanding how important it was to have the environmental change of a height adjustable desk, because these can be a costly investment for employers. So what we did is we designed 2 slightly different versions of our Smart Work and Life intervention. We had one version without the desk, so you can see all these different components here. And then we had one version which was all these different components, plus a height adjustable desk for each individual staff member. So we evaluated the effectiveness and cost effectiveness of our Smart Work and Life intervention through a randomized control trial. So a randomized control trial is the gold standard methodology for proving whether something works or not. So what we did is we recruited our 750 staff members, and then we randomized them by their office space to either a control group where they carried on with usual practice, an intervention-only group where they received our multi-component Smart Work and Life intervention, and then intervention group 2 was the Smart Work and Life intervention plus a height adjustable desk for each individual staff member. And Posture Right provided some of the height adjustable desk platforms for this study. And then we followed all of our participants up, regardless of which group they're in, at 3 and 12 months, so we could compare behaviour and outcomes across the 3 groups. So what did we find? So this figure here shows the change in sitting time per day for both intervention groups compared to the control group. So we found that both intervention groups reduced their sitting time at 3 and 12 months, but the intervention-only group reduced their sitting time by around 20 minutes a day at both time points. But for the intervention plus desk group, they reduced their sitting time by over an hour a day. So these results tell us 2 things. One, we were able to maintain that behaviour change across the 2 time points, which is really important because actually when people tend to make lifestyle changes, they do it for a few months and then it tails off. Whereas we were able to show with our strategies that we could maintain people's behaviour change. But secondly, you can clearly see that the group who received the intervention plus the height adjustable desk reduced their sitting time 3 times as much as the group that received the intervention on its own. One other thing that we noticed is that our workplace champions really were varied in terms of how much of the intervention they actually delivered. So our workplace champions were given a set schedule of when to deliver our intervention strategies. Now we had about 50 different office groups randomised to the intervention groups, and each office group had a workplace champion. So there was a wide variety across these 50 champions. So we did a sub-analysis to see whether the champions who implemented more of the intervention, their group had larger behaviour changes. And we did. We saw that the intervention-only group had reductions in sitting over 30 minutes when they implemented more of the intervention, and over 80 minutes per day in the group that also received the desk. But it was really important that even the workplace champions in the highest level of implementation still didn't implement all of the intervention as intended. So if we can start to understand how we can help workplace champions deliver more of the intervention, then hopefully we can see even larger behaviour changes with this type of intervention. So what did people think about our intervention? So as I mentioned before, one of the core components was the online education session, and we had over 90% completion rate for this. And most of the participants felt that this really increased their awareness and motivated them to make a change. So it was that foundation of our intervention. Many people commented that it was really an eye-opener in terms of the potential risks, and that was quite a motivator for them. And many people also felt that it should be part of their learning portfolio or their workplace induction. Most people appreciated the emails, although some people commented that they got lost in their pile of emails. But actually, there was a lot of comments around it. It didn't matter what the content of the email actually was. It was more just having that prompt to remind them that they were meant to be reducing their sitting time. In terms of the self-monitoring and prompt tools that we suggested, there was really mixed responses to these. Some people really liked the technology. Some people just did not get on with technology at all and were not interested in using it. So about a third of participants used the self-monitoring and prompt tools that we suggested. Many participants went out and bought their own wearable tracker. They felt that that was more useful for them. So somebody commented, you know, you're doing a piece of work and you think you're only there for 5 or 10 minutes, and then the thing goes off and actually you've been sat there for 30 minutes. So they found that really useful. So sitting less challenges, again, most people found these really useful, particularly for the group that didn't have the height adjustable desk. But there were some mixed responses. Some people that they just weren't interested in being involved in the challenges. And someone commented, it was just quite a bit of fun, some banter, and that was quite nice. A lot of us have worked together for a long time, and it was just having that light-hearted approach to it. The group catch-up sessions were particularly useful and helpful for people to formulate plans to sit less, motivate them, and they found that meeting as a group actually was really worthwhile rather than talking to their workplace champion individually. And somebody commented, just getting people to chat about what they've done, what they found useful, what they haven't managed to do, and share ideas. And it was almost getting that moral support. And they felt that people came out of these group catch-up sessions much more motivated. Someone else said it was good to just think about it and talk about it and have that space away to come away from your work and consider how you can actually start making it part of your routine. And then finally, with the height adjustable desks, nearly 80% of people use them every day for the first month, and this did tail off slightly towards the end, but still over 80% of people using the desk every day or at least a few times a week. And a lot of the people who had the desks felt that it made a huge difference to them in terms of their behaviour, and they felt that if they didn't have the desk, they don't think it would make much of a difference to them. And people commented about really changing their routine. So they have a 30 to 40-minute drive in, and they don't even sit down when they come in. They just make a drink, put the desk up and stand for the first hour of the day, and that really sets them up. So we asked our participants to complete a whole range of questionnaires to look at the impact of the intervention. And we saw a whole host of benefits for our intervention group compared to our control group. So people felt they were more energized, more engaged, less fatigued, less musculoskeletal issues. They actually felt more focused, more productive, less stressed, and improved quality of life. And importantly, when we looked at the cost of the programme versus the benefits, the programme was found to be cost saving. So £5 returned for every £1 spent. So as well as questionnaires, we also did focus groups with our participants to get their experiences of the intervention. And a lot of the benefits reported by the participants focused around feeling more energized and less fatigued. And many people felt that this was particularly useful for the afternoon time, where they tended to feel more tired after lunch. A lot of people also reported feeling more focused, more productive. They felt more alert and felt that they were able to concentrate better. So somebody here said, that's the thing that makes me mostly want to stand. When I've really got to get something complete and it's challenging mentally, I feel like standing and it helps me to do this. Other people said I concentrate better when I'm standing up than when I'm sitting down. And actually, some people commented the opposite. They felt that they couldn't concentrate when standing up. So it was really different for different people. And I can resonate with not being able to concentrate necessarily doing certain tasks standing up. I can do emails, I can look at data, I can do Teams meetings standing up. But if I'm writing, then I need to sit down. So it's different for different people. And then finally, the group that also received the height adjustable desk tended to report more frequently that they had fewer aches and pains, particularly in their neck, shoulders, and back. So their aches and pains had gone away from reducing their sitting time. So that was a quick whistle-stop tour of our Smart Work and Life intervention. But just to finish off, I just want to emphasise that I'm not saying that sitting is bad. All sitting is bad. We do need to spend some of our day sitting down. It's just when we do too much that's the issue. So it's really about getting that healthier balance between the time we spend sitting, the time we spend doing light activity, and trying to fit in some moderate to vigorous physical activity during the week in order to maximise our health and wellbeing benefits. Despite sitting being habitual and ubiquitous, we have shown that it is possible through multi-component interventions that we can reduce sitting time in people who have desk-based jobs. And this comes with a whole host of benefits, not just musculoskeletal benefits for both the individual and the employer, and they're also a cost-effective investment. Management buy-in, education, and environmental change seem key to getting that successful behaviour change, as well as providing people with a choice of strategies to engage in, because we found that different things work for different people within our interventions. And thank you for listening, and just to say thank you to the funders of my research. And if you wanted to read more about our Smart Work and Life intervention and have a look at some of our resources, you can have a look on our website. And if anybody wants to get in contact with me, there's various different methods there. Thank you.
Brilliant, Charlotte. That's fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Gee, there was so much information there. I think everyone's going to be sitting there processing it or standing there processing it. So let's see how we get on. Now, very much, I think we're on the same page of you, and some of you may already be aware, and some of you not, that we ran a Move It survey recently in the last couple of months, and we had 576 people taking part, which was fantastic. And if it was any of you who took part, thank you very much, because I think it's provided some great insights, and it complements actually Charlotte's research very well. As you can see, that 67% of our respondents said that they didn't think they moved enough. So people are aware of this problem. And even better, we've got 87% of people saying that they wish to change their habits and move more frequently. So I think that's fantastic. So Tom, can we have the next slide, please? So we were very interested in, digging a little bit more into this. And so we started to ask sort of which of our new hybrid working venues we felt that people thought they were less active in. And as you can see from the answer, most people at 58% thought they tended to be more sedentary in the home than in the office. And 80% thought they'd be in the office, and some people very much 24% thinking, not quite sure where they are. I mean, for me personally, I mean, it does depend what I'm doing. I mean, there are days when I'm at home that I just don't seem to sit down, and actually I take the opportunity to lie on the floor and do some exercises and go for a walk. But there are days, like we've had a few of those rainy days recently, when I would agree that I am definitely more sedentary in the office. Sorry, at home. When I'm in the office, though, I tend to be up and down like a yo-yo. It's a great opportunity to go and see everyone else. So very interesting, but it does seem to be an overall view that working from home tends to make us more sedentary and sit more. So we dug into that a little bit more. Next slide, please, Tom. And we asked, how often do you usually move away from your desk when working from home? And as you can see from the answers on the screen, gosh, there are some really quite high numbers there. Looking at the worst scenario, every 3 hours, there are 8% of people who felt when working from home, they left it that long to get up and around. And I hope what we're saying today will persuade people to perhaps have a look at their habits to see what they can do. We very much support people to sort of really move every 20 to 30 minutes and really get away from the workstation at least every hour as a routine. It will depend. We all have different tasks and things to do. But looking at those figures, we really need to start to see that people are getting less seated time. So Tom, next slide, please. So this is what we're trying to do. We want you to get involved with our Move More in 24 strategies and program. There are great prizes to win, and we hope to be providing you with some great resources and providing you with prompts and reminders to really try and support a change to the way people work and encourage people who are already thinking about moving more to do that, but also try and encourage people who haven't thought about it to do so too. We said that we provided some sit-stand platforms for the research, but we've actually got an Oplof sit-stand platform worth over £300 available as a prize. So definitely worth not only for your health, but also for the prizes to get involved. So next slide, please, Tom. We'd also like to recruit some champions. Charlotte referred to having champions as being a useful thing within her research. So we'd like to encourage people to sort of sign up for this. We're looking for 12 people to become Move More champions. And so, signing up, what do you get? Well, a lot of networking. We hope to facilitate networking within our champions. We like to highlight the work that you're doing. And there is even a free Move More in 24 water bottle that you will get. So if you feel that becoming a champion within your workplace is something you'd like to do, please could you email us at marketing@posturite.co.uk to register your interest, and we'll see if we can get you signed up. So really, enough of me at the moment. I'm going to hand on to our next presenter, my colleague Jamie, who's got some examples of where we've been helping people and actually some information about his own journey. So Jamie, over to you.
Thank you, Catherine. Really appreciate it. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Very good. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me on. Just talk a little bit about myself and how I spend my day. I've worked for Posturite for 14 years. I started off as an assessor, so I spent a lot of time driving. I'd say after the first 5 years, I really started to develop quite a severe back problem. And I'd say over the last sort of six to 8 years, I've been more account managing. So I'm out visiting clients. I'm in coffee shops. I'm working on trains, client sites, and I've really, it tends to be one of those things. You don't tend to fix something until there's a problem. So ultimately, when I started getting back pain, I really started to focus on what I was doing day to day. So sitting was a big problem for me. So I spent as much time as I could standing, but ultimately try not to spend too much time standing. So it's trying to break up and get as much movement as you can. If you could move to the next slide for me. Just to talk about a few of my clients that have invested in sit-stand desking. So there's a manufacturer in Hertfordshire that actually looked at an office refurb. So they first of all started looking at bench desking. I convinced them to look at the ability to stand throughout the day, especially for their customer service team. and they actually chose to invest in the back-to-back frames. There's not actually much of a difference between a static bench desk, when you compare it to the sit-stand desk in these days. So it was a really good switch for them. They used the back-to-back frames, the 350, and I'll talk about a few of the products in a second. They opted for acoustic panels. It's actually during COVID as well, so they opted for the acrylic screens. And previously, they actually invested in the Haag Sophia mesh, which is best known for its movement principles. It encourages movement. They try and hide the locking mechanism on the chair to really encourage that movement. So yeah, they done really well. Let's move on to the next slide, please. Just another client, housing association, so a lot of office staff, customer service, operatives, as well as sort of set down points for some of their engineers out on the road. But ultimately, they opted for some of the platforms across the building, so they could allow people to book these, and they have a hot desking situation within their office, so they book these for the whole day, or they might tend to book sort of small sessions, but they have a particular piece of software to allow them to do that. They're also looking at investing the next couple of years if budget allows them to do that, because I know that they're looking at trying to refurb the office. I've got one more client to talk about. If you can move to the next slide for me. It's a major clothing retailer, sort of head office in around Hertfordshire again. They really went for a massive refurb within the building. They did have a sit-stand desk at the end of every bench, which I know a number of my clients have. However, if they had people that needed to stand or had particular musculoskeletal issues within their actual team, they weren't able to offer that sit-stand ability. So they opted for an oploft and using an extended height clamp onto the desk to try and reduce the weight on the oploft, to actually just raise the oploft to allow them to use the standing function. And they attached the screen to the desk just to reduce the weight on the desk, on the actual oploft itself. So you can see a few of my clients have invested there. I'd say at least at a very minimum, half of my clients have got some form of sit-stand ability, whether that's meeting spaces or wherever it might be. But let's talk about some of those products that I talked about just then. So the Josho desk is our entry-level desk. It's brought out during COVID almost to kind of fit that home working environment. It's available in 3 colours now. Grey is an addition to that. We have white and black. The size of the desk is 1200 by 700 in one size, and ultimately these have been very, very popular in the home environment, or very low. It's a lower price point, and ultimately allowing these home workers, again, filtering back to the information we saw there, home working is an issue, but you've got to have the space for it. Our next desk here is our premium desk, the desk right 550. Very smooth movement. We've got available various colors available. So we have black, silver, and white frames. You can also mix match the top. So we have ash white and black available. They use a new form of technology within the actual frame itself, and the idea is that you're able to build it within about 10 minutes. Ultimately, we do offer a white glove service with that as well, but you have the ability to almost click these legs and frames within place within about 10 minutes. So yeah, that is our premium frame. Move on to the next slide for me. The desk right 350 is our mid-range. You do have, with all of our desks, the option to add cable management, a programmable memory switch, and there is an application that you can download. I did try and do it recently. It's from Linac, the desk controller, but for some reason isn't working. So we might sort of update you with some information on that shortly. It's not on our website, but ultimately we can share some information. The portable height adjustable desk you can see on the right hand side there, very good for tight spaces, ideally just for a laptop use, or meeting spaces. Or again, I've got one of my clients that has 6 of these in a meeting room, and ultimately people then face each other with their laptops and try and change that position as much as they can. So it's worked out very well. I also look after the NHS sector in the south, and hospitals, clinic areas, consultation rooms. These have been very popular as well. If you can move on to the next slide for me. Oploft, very popular, low profile, weighs about 12 kilos. So ideally, it's got a little bit of weight to it, but you can tuck it to one side if not needed. So home environments are very good. I use it on my dining room table quite a lot, especially when my other half is using the sit-stand desk at home. ultimately you don't want to take over your home with these pieces of equipment. You want to try and keep that home and work life balance there, which I try and do. But obviously try and encourage movement. I do sometimes use a window ledge in my home as well. So I live in a flat. As you can see on the right hand side here, we've got the stand friend, which ultimately is a very minimalistic, and you can see it uses a shelf-based system, but again, it's something you can tuck away at the end of a day, and still allow you to stand up. So yeah, if we can move on to the next slide for me. Desk Right 100, again, very popular. So it is more cumbersome. It's quite a weighty piece of kit, but ultimately you do have the adjustment for the tension to allow it to be easier to lift, especially if you do have any musculoskeletal issues. You want to try and make sure you minimize that lift. And it's, again, education on how you should lift a desk up and back down into that position. The new version of this desk is the Desk Right 100E, so electronic function and offers the same type of layout. So you have a keyboard tray and you have your laptop or monitor on there. You can obviously attach monitor arms as well to give you multi-screen options. The Lotus desk from Fellows has 4 different versions. So you have the DX model that has all the bells and whistles on it. So you have wireless charging, you have cable management integrated, you have the adjustment for the actual weight tension, similar to the Desk Right 100. You have 2 other versions for the Lotus as well. You have a column version as well as a monitor arm type version for tighter spaces. Again, the majority of our platforms will have a minimum footprint of around 60 centimeters in terms of the depth. So I know some of my clients in NHS have had to use these kind of solutions to kind of clamp onto the end and then give you that ability to work more flexibly. So yeah, good mixture there. So if you can move on to the next slide for me. Movement. I'm actually on a movement now, so I'm moving around and actually encouraged in this circulation. And the good thing about the movement, especially if you're using a sit-stand desk, is you can actually change the height quite frequently. So again, it's all about moving, standing, stretching, perching, whatever it might be, but just for short periods of time to obviously break up that movement as best as possible. I'm also a big fan of the Jabra Evolve. I'm not actually using that right now, but ultimately I've got another one coming shortly. I've had mine for a good few years now, and I get lots of use out of it. And the beauty of this particular device is you can connect it to 2 devices at once, so your mobile as well as your computer. And it's pretty much made for Teams as well. So you see the Teams logo on the side. So, excuse me. So very good all-rounder. You can move on to the next slide for me. Logic 220. I mean, a lot of chairs move and actually encourage movement now, but the Logic 220 encourages this negative as well as positive tilt. Very fine movement, 10-year warranty, top of the range when it comes to ergonomic chairs. This specific model of chair has been developed over the years. We used to have the leading product, the Logic 400, but that's been upgraded to the 220 now. A lot more thoracic support. The functions are very easy to use. So if you're in a hot desking environment, you've got that ability to be able to adjust it very easily, and the buttons are very tactile. And an addition to this on the right hand side, I mean, if you do need to use a footrest, obviously not everybody does, and it's always trying to encourage that best position in the hips and the knees when sitting. But this particular footrest encourages movement and has this kind of 18-degree rocking function on there to allow you to just encouraging movement through your feet. So ultimately the chair would encourage movement as well. So obviously using your calf muscles as much as possible will obviously pump the circulation around your body. So adding that little bit of movement throughout the day is obviously, is key. And having these kind of devices is a must do in certain situations. But ultimately just getting out of your chair, having a quick lap around the chair. I do that quite often if I don't have any of these devices. So it's a small change to make a big difference. Thank you. Any questions?
Gosh, yes. I think we've packed a huge amount in there between the research from Charlotte and then the practicalities from you, Jamie, and the Move More survey. I think, wow, quite a bit. And as a result, we've got lots of questions. So I don't know whether Charlotte, do you want to pop yourself back on screen? Because I've noticed that there's a question there that I think you'd like to answer. And we've got a question. How would you class cycling, seeing as though it's a seated activity? So Charlotte, do you want to give us your response to that one?
Yes, sure. So we kind of use sitting as an easy to understand term rather than sedentary time. So when I'm talking about the impacts of sitting time, I'm really talking about sedentary time, which is sitting, reclining during waking hours, but with low energy expenditure. So cycling wouldn't be part of that. So yeah, it won't be included in those risks. So cycling is something that's certainly beneficial for us.
Okay, I mean, that's excellent. I mean, with that in mind, so, perching as well, as long if it's sedentary, probably falls into a similar vein as sitting, or perhaps because you're more likely to have more foot action, perhaps is not as bad as the traditional sitting action.
Yeah, so if I think about it in terms of improving sort of cardiometabolic health rather than sort of the musculoskeletal side of things. So what we tend to see is once you go from sitting to standing, you see a lot of extra muscle activity because you're using the largest muscles in your body, which are your bum and your legs. So for me, I would always try to promote, if you can, stand or walk around to activate the muscles, and then that activates your metabolism and everything starts working.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. We've also got another question here. Has there been any analysis of the impact of reduced sitting on specific conditions such as back pain and arthritis?
I'm not sure about arthritis, but I can talk from my research. So certainly we've done a few of these sitting reduction interventions in the workplace, and it seems that when people have the higher reductions in sitting time, they certainly indicate that they've had improvements in their back pain and general aches and pains. So we've certainly seen that through our sitting reduction interventions.
Yeah,
I'm just not sure about the arthritis.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, certainly with sort of my background as a physio and from a personal back pain problem, I mean, I certainly know that having the ability to move more and to stand makes a huge impact on lower back pain. Although not all lower back pain is the same. I think we just have to state that because obviously it's covers a multitude of sins, isn't it? There are some people who find sitting a relief sometimes.
Yeah, but I suppose it's also important to remember that it's about the regular posture change. So it's not
Yes.
about just going from sitting to standing and staying at standing. It's important to have that regular posture change from sitting to standing, but also standing to sitting as well for those parts of things.
Yeah. In fact, I mean, we've just had a comment here. Is swapping sitting for standing treating symptoms rather than causes another static posture? Wouldn't it be better for DSE users to move around and do some mobility movements? You'll comment on that, but I think it feeds into what we've just been discussing, really.
Yeah, so I mean, if people can move around, then that's great. That would always be beneficial over and above standing. But if standing is the only thing that you can do, then that's sort of something to do. At least.
Yeah. Excellent. Jamie, I've got a question really here for you. DSE users in open plan offices seem often to feel a bit shackled to their desks, and even sit to eat their lunches. Have we got any tips for encouraging, how to make that change to feeling a bit more liberated, I suppose?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a common question, and sort of filtering back to some of Charlotte's research and comments around, engaging with management and leaders and really sort of setting the scene from the top down. To be honest, I think a lot of people are very much, if I'm away from my desk or if I'm not staring at my screen, I'm not working. So it's really trying to change that culture, and you can see it a lot more now in offices as people are trying to encourage that. People are dedicated teams for it, wellbeing or wherever it might be. But encouraging these micro breaks where possible. It's if we can include sit stand options. It's this common thing. I mean, rather than pick up the phone and speak to somebody on the other side of the office, go and speak to them. But when you get there, is it a good position to start leaning over a desk? So ultimately having a sit stand desk is really good for these situations. So somebody comes over, stand up, have a talk, have a chat. but yeah, it's about breaking the cultures and really sort of setting a scene from the top, I find. So and again, I think that idea around champions is sort of following the same sort of norm around, you know, DSC health and safety and all the rest of it. So I think that would, yeah, that should really start to change even further moving forwards.
Okay, brilliant. So we've got a question here. As I thought guidance recommends that you should stand for around 8 minutes, then sit for about 22 minutes. But we've just said that when somebody drives into the office, they make a drink and stand for an hour. I think maybe Charlotte, you maybe want to sort of comment on, you know, I suppose, you know, how rigid do we need to be with our routine? I suppose that's really what the question's asking from well, that's my interpretation.
Yeah, so I suppose that one example from one of our participants, that's just what worked for them. And some people talked about task-based use of their desk or time-based. It really depends what works for them. So some people said, I'll stand until my body tells me to sit down, and vice versa. Some people said, oh, I stand for half an hour, sit for half an hour. But our recommendation would always be, really, if you can change your posture around every 30 to 60 minutes, that would be preferable.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Mind if
one thing. Sorry,
Sorry.
Jamie, carry on.
I was just going to say, just to add to that, I mean, it's relying on your body, isn't it? You know, if your body starts to feel tired, or, you know, it's really focus on what you're doing. If you feel like you start to lean, you know, that might be an indication you might need to sit down and rest for a small period. Those kind of indicators, you know, it's just rely on what your body's trying to tell you. I think is
Yeah,
another point.
I think it's being more aware, isn't it,
Yeah,
of your body. But I
yeah,
also, I mean, I would like to see that actually we talk about, you know, when we talk about efficiency and how you do your work, and actually talking about, you know, the postures you might use to do your work, you know, and encourage people to think about the opportunities they have to do other things, because we all work in very different ways. And as Charlotte, as you said, you know, some people found that you know, standing was beneficial for them to do certain tasks, but other people didn't. And so we've got to know ourselves and look for those opportunities, and hopefully look for those equipment opportunities also to support the way we like to work, with the ultimate goal of getting more movement throughout the day. I think, you know, Charlotte's research is so clear on the vital nature of this, really. So, so I suppose that leads on, Jamie. How can we stop people being so reactive to the risks of DSE? You know, I mean, we've had the regulations, haven't we, for 30 odd years, and people often still wait till it hurts.
well, yes, a perfect example. What I brought up, you know, sort of earlier in my talk, is I didn't actually do anything until there was an issue. I think again it filters back to Charlotte comments around education. It's around education and saying that giving examples to these kind of situations and people that have been through it to talk about it, and again, this champion might be somebody that's gone through that similar kind of situation, to try and, you know, give details on their experiences. I just think it all kind of filters down to this education, people wanting to engage in it, and encouragement from your managers. So these team regular catch ups, and I saw some comments there come through on the chat around, you know, some of the initiatives that they've brought into you know, walk and talk meetings, and, you know, teams and all the rest of it. We set ourselves a challenge of making sure that we're standing always when we're on a teams meeting, but again, it's all about this education. I think spot checks, and maybe try and encourage buddy systems within the building to look out for each other. And that's always been the way forwards with regards to health and safety, isn't it? If you spot something, don't not say anything, give some encouragement to that person, and if they don't want to take it, that's them, but at the ultimate, you're doing what you think's right.
Charlotte, this one for you. I don't know whether, I mean, I'm a great believer in, you know, managers leading by example, you know, and I noticed within your research, you know, obviously part of the things was management education and that type of thing. Did you get any results to show that there was a correlation between managers engaging and better outcomes? Was that something you looked for in your research?
No, that's a very good question. Actually, we didn't look at management engagement, actually. We only really looked at sort of the workplace champion implementation and their characteristics, and whether they affected implementation and then outcomes rather than the manager side of things. But actually, in the focus groups, we were still getting comments around they didn't feel managers were on board as much, even though we'd done all of that work. They didn't feel like in their senior leadership team meetings that they could just stand up and that would be well perceived. So there's still definitely a lot of work that we still need to do around making sure the managers are on board and always encouraging that it is acceptable to do these certain things.
Yes, I mean, actually, that takes me back to a long time ago when I was first with Posturite, because it's always been acceptable within Posturite in the middle of meetings to stand up and walk around. And when you first come across that as a culture, it's quite shocking, strangely. You know, people get up because you think, well, what's going on? And I have been in meetings where we've had people from outside the organisation be in, and you could see that visibly taken aback that somebody might actually stand and go and lean up against the wall or walk around. And it's that sort of permission, isn't it, and doing something different that we need to sort of try and that's where I think managers really need to come into it, don't they? In promoting rather than allowing, and that comes through.
Yeah.
We're running out, but there's one here. In your research, did you find that there was an increase in musculoskeletal issues due to some people putting more weight on one leg whilst using a sit-stand desk? Any thoughts or outcomes from that?
There were some comments from some of our participants that initially, when they started using the height adjustable desk, that their legs did ache more because it was just them getting used to it, or for those people who were just really enthusiastic at the start and stood for several hours rather than changing their posture. So there were those sort of comments, but it just took people a while to get used to it and think about how best to use it for themselves. But I don't think we necessarily in our data saw the increases. It was more the opposite, really, for most of our participants. It was beneficial.
Okay. Now we've got quite a few questions that I'm going to lump together. And I think Jamie, you might want to come in this one too, as well, about perch stools using sit-stand desks, balance balls, those sorts of things, and then being part of the regulations. How do they fit with the regulations? Jamie, do you have a thought before I leap in, or any thoughts on that?
I just think it's educating the person on how to use that piece of equipment properly. You know, you get a lot of like therapists and what have you saying, "I'll use a gym ball or use that," but then not necessarily give the guidance on how long they should be using it for. You know, I think that's always been the key, and it's always with regards to like the sit stand situation. You know, a lot of people are including these products, but not really giving much of an initiative behind it on how they should be using it, and again setting that culture within the business. So I think it's all part and parcel. I use like a ball by my feet just to encourage a little bit of movement. Obviously that comes with trip hazards, but you've got to be careful. You know, I've recently got a puppy and that's obviously kept me on my toes. But at the same time, you've got sort of like other devices that help try and keep your feet a bit more engaged. But again, it's encouraging movement, and these kind of devices are just got to be used in the right way, I think.
Yeah, I think, I mean, for me, you know, these active sitting, perching are brilliant to, you know, to facilitate different postures and movement. But you're not going to be doing it all the time. There's a time for movement. There's a time for exercise. I mean, I can't use a cycle bike at my desk. I can't concentrate. But it doesn't stop me using cycling as a good form of exercise when I'm not working. So I think there's a time and a place for these things. Charlotte, do you have a view on it, or?
I suppose it depends what you're hoping to achieve from it or what your focus is, because I think in terms of my research and showing all the wide-ranging benefits of actually reducing your sitting time and regularly breaking up the sitting time from standing and moving around, you wouldn't necessarily get all of those benefits from those types of equipment. It might just be helping with one thing, for example.
Yeah, and I actually do see, you know, when you've got a lot of devices that don't provide support, an awful lot of people actually don't, you know, after a period of time, actually adopt poor postures, which then can cause other postures. So it's good to have active sitting devices to change your posture and move, but it's not for long-term sitting then. And as you stated, Charlotte, sitting is, you know, we all need to sit. We need some support at times. We just need to reduce the amount of time we do doing it, isn't it, really? Right. It's 11:30. I think we've run out of time for questions. Is there anything that you'd just like to leave people with, Charlotte? Any final thoughts to sort of sum up, or obviously your slides and the presentation is going to be shared afterwards.
I think it's really just thinking about your daily activities and whether there are any small things that you can change during your day to sit less and move more.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. So I think I'm going to thank you, Charlotte. That was brilliant. And I really hope that's inspired people and given them tools actually to take it back to their workplace to really make a difference with. So thank you so much. Jamie, thank you for sharing your insights with us. And I know you'll be available. There's been a few questions very, very specifically at Posturite in our chat. I know you'll probably jump on those. And thank you everybody for listening today. Looking forwards, on the 19th of March, we've got another webinar, and this one is going to be on sight loss in the workplace. So if that's something that you would find useful, please join us for that. Otherwise, please enjoy the rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you for everybody. Bye now.
Thank you.